Ireland last week announced its very first non-austerity budget in 7 years. I'm joined today by Oliver Mangan from AIB. Oliver, one of the major highlights was Michael Noonan's announcement to the end of the double Irish tax loophole. Now, Oliver, are you concerned about the negative impact this could actually have on investors' sentiment?
Well, I think he's responding to international trends there. What he's actually announced is there may be a counterbalancing measure. There may be a proposed new rate of corporate tax for earnings from intellectual property rights. Now, that hasn't been decided yet. He's launching consultations in that regard. The other thing is that this double tax arrangement is being phased out over a prolonged period of time. It won't actually end until the end of 2020 for existing companies. Any new companies coming in will not be able to avail of it from the start of next year. So there's a long phase-out plan in this, and there's also what he calls a proposed new roadmap for the corporate tax structure in Ireland to ensure that Ireland remains an attractive destination for foreign direct investment. And as I say, that may well involve a second rate of corporation tax, which is lower than the current rate, which stands at 12.5%, and is obviously undertaking consultations in that regard, and he'll be consulting with our EU partners in that regard as well. So I think, I would point out as well that it's been known that these changes are coming for quite some time, and yet we still have a very strong inflow of foreign direct investment into Ireland in the last couple of years, and the pipeline remains strong in that regard as well.
What else stood out to you in this recent budget?
Well, I suppose what was striking is we've had very severe increases in direct taxes here, income tax and what have you. The top rate of marginal tax in this economy is now 52%, and you reach that on areas of less than 33,000. Now, dramatic measures had to be taken to stabilise the public finances, but the minister was able to announce the beginning of some modest reduction in income tax rates last week. The top rate of tax has been cut by 1% from 52 to 51, and that will apply to earnings up to 70,000. There was also relief in terms of what we call the universal social charge here for low and middle income earners. So it's very welcome to see some reductions in income tax. I suppose it was also the first budget where we didn't see any expenditure cuts. Indeed, there were some small spending increases in particular areas, and that was all made possible by the fact that the budget outturn this year, there's going to be a much lower budget deficit than had been anticipated. The original target was the budget deficit here would be close to 5%. The minister's latest estimates are the budget deficit in 2015 would be 3.7%, and because of the continuing strong growth of the economy, on a do-nothing basis, he was indicating that the budget deficit would be 2.4%, 2.5%. So you had some leeway to loosen up our fiscal policy slightly and still set a target of 2.7% of GDP for the fiscal deficit in 2015. So I think the key thing, I suppose what stood out, which hadn't been expected until recently, is that we're able to begin to unwind some of the very severe increases in income taxes in particular that had to be imposed over the last 5 or 6 years.
And Oliver, do you think we will continue to see a rise in demand for Irish bonds?
Well, the Irish bond market has performed really, really well over the last couple of years, and 10-year yields now are down well below 2%. They got us out to 1.65, 1.7. Now, we did see a flight to quality last week in all markets, and some peripheral markets saw quite a significant rise in yields. The rise in Irish yields was modest enough. 10-year bond yields went up to 185, 190 in terms of yield, but in the last day or so they've fallen back again below 1.8%. So I think people recognise, we've seen upgrades from the rating agencies for the Irish sovereign. We see a reduction in the budget deficit. We have seen an extension in the maturity profile. That very little Irish debt matures next year, and there's at the same time there's strong demand for Irish bonds. I would say, when I look at the Irish bond market, I would compare it to Belgium to some extent, and 10-year yields there are about 1.25%. Belgium has a very high level of national debt, so there's no reason, provided the sentiment in bond markets settles down again, and financial markets generally, why there can't be a further narrowing of the spread between Irish bonds and, let's say, a market like Belgium, either later this year or into 2015. Given that we've come through the crisis at this stage, the economy is growing strongly, and very favourable trends in the public finances, and little enough pressure in terms of debt issuance. So, and as I say, that has been reflected in the upgrades Ireland has seen from the rating agencies this year. So there probably is. I mean, if our current economic performance continues, and I would say all other things equal, there's a good chance we will come in below again the budget deficit target for this year. If it emerges again for 2015, if that trend continues in 2015, we could see further outperformance by Irish bonds, because in absolute terms the yields may not look that high, but when you compare them to markets like Belgium, we're still offering quite a generous spread.
Oliver, thank you very much. As always, a pleasure speaking to you. Well, viewers, do stay tuned as we have plenty more updates heading your way. See you very soon.